Okay, so I imagine this is to be like an ABC book, but yeah. And the way it would work is, where is it? There'll be images. There'll be images on the side. There'll be images here, and this right here is my first attempt at it. You can see I go through a lot of different things, and we're gonna go through them now. But like, I imagine on one side there'll be my face, on another side there'll be a video. So it's like a living storybook. But let's get into it. So A, the letter A. What's A for? A is for acknowledgments, and I have a lot of acknowledgments, but we're not going to do them right now. A is also for ancestors, and I'm going to talk about how I've learned that the connection between you and your ancestors can never be broken, and they're just waiting there by the phone for you to pick up the phone and call. And when you pick up, and they're like, "Yo," and it's a really beautiful conversation because they're like, "Yo, we're just here for you. Like, what's up? Where you at? Holla at us." And I think that's really powerful because for people, for diasporic people who have not been really into ancestor reverence or respect, you feel awkward stepping into that world. But when you do, you find out that they were like, "Yo, what's up? We waiting on you. We're not going to leave you." And I want to introduce concepts like 7 generations, concepts of trying to live a life that would make your ancestors. We're already living a life that can make our ancestors proud in a way. It's really cool. And about continuity and time, and to define the term ancestors broadly to include trees and all the things that come before us that we live with. That, yeah, you get it. A is also for abolition. I want a Newtown to have no police. An example of that is in season 3, episode 2. We have a What Would Happen If called Team HR, and that's a team of superheroes who do harm reduction. And what would that look like? And it would look awesome. Like Batman. Batman's always catching robbers, right? Couldn't Batman catch a robber and be like, "How'd you become a robber?" And then help that person out, like, solve the problem, and not just. Anyways, you get it. And this is really reflected in Supership. Abolitionist concepts can be found by Ruth, her last name, Wilson, and also a lot of other people. But I've come to wrestle with abolitionist ideas in the sense of like, it would be nice to have something or someone's or people who are interested in keeping people safe. But I think safety is really about building a society or a community where people are well and supported, and not really about stopping problems. So that's kind of the Supership. That's what that's all about. A is also for Anishinaabe, because my granny cat character is not so much based on my grandmother, but it's more based on me trying to act as if I was learning and inspired by the grandmother teachings. It just so happens to also represent granny too, you know what I mean? And the best way I can try to honor and shout out Anishinaabe teachings, I hope I spelled that right and said it right, is by just letting you know that the one translation of it is the good humans. And I just feel like for people to call themselves good humans is cool. You know what I mean? It shows intention. And I'm really into asking questions about what is good. Okay, A is also for insects versus animals versus insects 3000. This is like our best case neoliberal society. Whatever you're imagining. Imagine Kamala Harris is president, and everybody's got, I don't know, basic income. Are we good? No. Okay. B is for embodiment. That's right. B is for embodiment. We have a character named Chimera Cat, and she's all about embodiment. And we're taking this whole animal embodiment, dancing. We're doing a lot with it. But really, it's about dance as being, and about prizing being states over material wealth, about non-numerical points. I think humans are always trying to be good or successful or whatever that means, and I want to try to show that there are ways of being good that aren't about numbers, and one of them is about embodiment, and I want to show that through dance. So Chimera Cat's gonna have a song called "Show Me." Don't tell me. I don't care that you're a duck. I don't care what you're calling yourself, but if you can quack and you can swim, I'll quack with you. And this is kind of challenging people who challenging me. People are like, "Oh, I'm black. I'm about." Really? How black are you? Or how what? Show me in your work. Show me in your consumption, in your language, in your actual activity. Don't identify yourself in words. Identify yourself in being states and in actions. Show me. All right. And now to take this embodiment to another level, we also have Meta, who is the child protagonist in our story, and his suit will speak to him and will operate kind of as like Iron Man's AI and also Spider-Man's intuition, but it never speaks in words. It speaks in feelings, you know? And I just want to talk about the body's intelligence, but now the suit will have an intelligence, and the suit will also be animated by intelligent living pixie dust called Flow. So that takes it to the other thing as well. The book of questions is the what we're calling our social media ask for help app, where people ask questions to the community, and if people in the community have answers, they answer the questions, and then the super ship goes and shares those answers with you in song. Again, embodiment. C is for a consent-based society, and that's led by my friends Stop and Go, who are the gods and goddesses of consent and play. So we're talking about enthusiastic yeses and boundaries and all of that stuff. C is also for colonization and neoliberalism, and we're gonna say that this form of colonization operates as a brainwashing fungus-based mind virus. You know that fungus that can get into the ant's head and get the ant to climb up and kill itself and spread? We're gonna say that like colonization and neoliberalism is kind of a bit about that, and also talk about how, especially in this capitalist society, we have a problem with news stories, and we're gonna present dogma as not being bad, but as being boring, because I think for children or for people, boring is kind of a thing that you don't want. All right, D is for dance. We've done that already. D is for decolonization is not a metaphor. We've done that already. D is also for dogma, dystopianism, and dualism, because we feel that, and I say this even though I'm in a dualism too, like us versus them, A versus B, blah blah blah, is a bit boring. There's not enough rainbow in that, you know? And I think that when you get to dualistic thinking, you can get trapped. So even in my story, I'm critiquing dualistic thinking, even though I'm operating within it as a way too, but I'm trying to get out of it. How do you get out of it? E is for the earth as an entity, earth as mother, the earth as universe, the earth as being a central character in the story. And at the end of my story, we're going to be like, oh shit, sorry earth. And it's going to come up. The earth is going to come up as a being, that is worthy and deserving or requiring some kind of relationship and apology. The earth as a source of spirit, not just a source of material, but the source of life. And this is really a big deal for me, because we talk about, food and water give us life. Yeah, which means they're the source of spirit. Like without you get it. Ecocide. My story is gonna also play with video game metaphors, and the ultimate game over is ecocide. I think there's gonna be a scene where the animal empress is shooting nuclear dragon breath at the insect queen granny, and people are gonna be like, oh, if this keeps up, it's gonna destroy the environment. And granny's gonna be like, the environment, it's gonna kill us. How do I explain this? If we hurt our environment, we're hurting ourselves. And I really want to we're not trying to save the earth. We're trying to save life that we live with, so game over. Emotions, embodiment. What would happen if we were enough? We're always trying to be gooder. What would happen if we were enough? And what is good? This is cool. When my friend asked me, I told him, I'm trying to write stories about a better world. And he's like, that's really pretentious. He said, if you don't define what you mean by better, then you're just like, it's rude. So now I'm like, all right, what about stories where it's enough? Because that's a tangible concept, right? Like we can just chill. F is for flow. Flow is the magical living pixie dust that we use to make everything happen. So it's like, how does your super ship fly? Flow. It's a plot device that I'm using to solve all my problems, but also it represents fungibility and how most of our society and most capitalism exists on the fungibility of labor and people that we don't really acknowledge, and we're like, how is it so amazing, everything is so cheap. It's just because what is the thing, oil is subsidizing our existence. It's fungible. So, but what happens if the oil had feelings? Fan fiction. In the last season, when things get wrecked, the only way they get fixed is partly by the story stormers, the audience submitting possible solutions, and this will be heralded or led by Meta's little sibling. But it's called Rebel Radio. Basically, I'll be encouraging my audience to take my characters and write better stories with them. Forest fires and the status quo in QD. This is inspired a lot by the Hindu goddess Kali, by the need for things to burn down, and the idea that things burning and changing isn't always bad. And when Flo, who is also called QB, gets hacked and abused, she's able to reclaim herself by becoming QD, Queen Defragment, Queen Decolonize, Queen Delete, Queen Deconstruct, and she just goes out and just takes all of her stuff back. And I'm excited about that. And there's a lot of stuff relating to Kali and that relates to social change through death and through the end and through ending and cycles. So that's season 7 and how G is for Granny Griot. She is probably my favorite character in the story. Maybe they're tied. Okay, I'm getting in trouble. My characters don't like it when I compare them to each other. Okay, but I really like Granny Griot. I put my heart and soul into her. Literally, I put my heart and soul into her. But she's a story goddess. She is a trickster. She is my attempt at trying to understand and embody and play with the ideas of grandmother and grandfather teachings. And she's the queen of the little things. She's also gonna have these gifts. She's gonna give people the gift to ask questions, the gift to yield, the gift to say no. She's gonna be cool. She's got these gifts. And we're always asking the question about what is good, because Granny actually exists in a world of she's more of a creative workshop facilitator. As at first I thought she was gonna be like a matriarchal creator goddess who gives birth to worlds with the power of her voice and story, and she's that. But the world that she's trying to give birth to is a workshop. She's inviting everybody to her cookout, saying, "Come to the cook." And there's a song like, "Who can come to the cookout? You can come to the cookout, but you got to be a lookout," which is kind of a conversation about allyship and all that other shit. But she really just wants to work with characters and the values and find out what is good. She's not trying to dictate her idea of good. She just wants to play, and that's why she got bored of the protagonist and being used. She knows that there are more stories than simply the win-lose stories, and she wants to play in those stories. The letter H is for how to say sorry to your mother, the earth. The letter I is for internationalism. Our story exists at the nexus of stories, and there's a lot of jumping between stories and having characters from other universes come in, and there's even different types of beings. There's people who are just characters in the story. There's values, there's elements, there's forces, and they're all personified, embodied. It's and embodied, and they have wants and yeah. So the Newtowners and the characters in my story are often in a relationship, in a way trying to coerce or convince or get the attention of the values, and partly that's how some of these dances go. Let's say you want the value of bravery. Bravery exists as a being in this universe, and if you do a bravery dance and bravery sees the dance, bravery I like that dance. Bravery will bless you with some bravery. It's partly a way to, you can see it, there's a lot of implications for this, but there are 4 different types. There's the forces, the ancestors, the feelings, and the values. Yeah. So we and there's characters from other fictions jumping in. There's all kinds of stuff. Is that your hill? This is my thing about media attention. I watch the news right now, and COVID's blowing up. and they still dedicate like 10 minutes to sports. Like, is that really important right now? You know, or like people, just the things that we fight about, the things that we argue about. Is this really the issue right now? I'm big into triage. You know, triage when you're like, you know, in a battle or on war, and there's a lot of people hurt, and you have to make decisions as to what really requires your attention. And I feel like a lot of our academia and a lot of our media cycle is so obsessed with new takes or slightly new takes or interesting that people oftentimes make arguments that aren't very important just for attention. And I'm critical of that. I'm also critical of critics. So Antimatter is not really seen as a good character in my story, even though he's very useful and I love him. Okay, intention. I think I want magic in my story to be intention based, because for many reasons. But there's a character called Max, and he has a mind garden where he can plant an intent for an idea and get it. So that's how we invented flow. We planted a seed for something that would help us. You know, it's almost like you ask your mind garden to be something, and then you plant it and you become it, but really it's intention. I want my stories to be living and interactive, so that's a big part of it. And a class of being in my story that embodies this are the story stormers. And the story stormers are my audience, and they have the ability to interrupt my story if they say, what would happen if? What would happen if? What would happen? What would happen? What would happen if? They do that, I'll have to stop and be like, all right, what do you want? And then they can add to my story and remix it. But their actual mediator for that will be Meta. Granny isn't going to interact with them. Granny is interacting with Meta. He's a story stormer already. And if you want to interact with Granny, you got to go through Meta. So you get Meta's attention, and then Meta gets Granny's attention. It's just a way for me to buffer if I'm ever telling these stories live, and a way to say that they could also be in that seat of Meta. Insects. We do a lot with insects, but really they're a plot device, and I think I have to apologize to insects and animals for misappropriating them and using them incorrectly. I'm really just speaking about humans. But there are like good insects in my story and bad insects, and you can imagine insects as being like immigrants, or being the people who are part of your society but you use for labor. And what do you do with the people who are part of your society that aren't citizens and don't have any labor you want? Shadow war. Okay, J is for juxtaposition. I will be using a lot of characters from other stories. Like, I just casually reference Spider-Man. I call Quanta Captain Marvel. I say that like Animal Empress is like Thanos with like 5 gemstones. Granny's got 1. She's like Doctor Strange. Like, I do it all the time. I'm really gonna come for people like John Stuart Mills and make him seem like somebody who was you know those kids who walk into your house, grab your toy and say mine? And you're like, bro, you can play with it if you want, but why are you saying it's yours right now? You don't even live here. You know, that's kind of how I feel about colonizers trying to grab up land. It's like, yo, the fuck, you trying to own land right now? You don't even live here. What the fuck? So I'm going to do that a lot. And even criticize people who aren't. Yeah, but also to say that remix is a form of creation. There's an article that you sent me about that. Okay, K. I have things for K, but they're not here right now. It's already going to be too long. L is for language. And I use language in really interesting ways. Like, you can talk about flow for a while before. She's going to speak as a drum machine. She's going to speak in beats. Oh, you want an apple? No, you don't want an apple. You want applesauce. Apple juice. Okay, I get it. And like, also, Meta has a suit that speaks to him in feelings. So there's all this translation between different levels, and truth goosebumps will be a thing. And this is, I think language is really like your language is file format. And file formats can operate within different operating systems. And to me, your operating system is like your colonial paradigm, or non-colonial paradigm, if you will. Land as teacher, land as life. Teacher with that. You see the typo. I can't fix it now. Land as spirit, land as mother and grandmother. Love as connection. You know, relationship. M is for mutual aid, super ship, circle ship. We talked about the mind gardening and coding. Coding is a way to communicate with flow when you want to, because flow is a programmable type of pixie dust that can operate and change and grow depending on what it needs and what it understands and how much of it that you have. And the programming language that flow operates in is haiku. You speak the flow in haiku, and your haikus need to be cool, clear, and clean. And that's partly I came with that just because I was trying to rhyme, but I think in Ifa or in Yoruban thought, you want to keep a cool head, you know. So I think the coolness is definitely cool. I didn't, however, I don't think that. Maroonage. Granny's a maroon. She leaves. The story begins with her leaving the kingdom. This, not paradise, but highly advanced and very, very advanced society that is very inclusive and stuff. She leaves. So this is about refusal, but also I want to represent maroonage not as leaving. I want to represent maroonage as giving birth or being what you are and refusing to be what you are not. You know? Mushrooms. I don't know. I need to do something with mushrooms because I love them. So I think the mushrooms are going to partly be in connection with, I don't know, but this is probably going to be, I need to have some more plant representation in my story. That's very missing. So this is an official apology to mushrooms. Okay. But the mushrooms and the plants will exist on my green world, and my green world is about harmony, and music is harmony. And I want to do a thing. I think there's an author named Victor Wotan who really taught me about music theory in a beautiful way. He describes it in like a spiritual way, but I want to say that like there's a chord that is a unison, which is the same notes, which is partly what our dogma tries to teach. And then there are like jazz chords where some of the shit don't always harmonize properly, and that's beautiful. So we can have harmony through dissent. We can have because we can resolve it. You know, when you play a chord that doesn't fit, you play a couple other notes and you sweeten it up. And I can actually show that with music. So this is another way to teach thought without language, in a way, to show, okay, this is music, but also so is this. You know, nothing is neutral. This is about positionality, but also just like how if you're here, how can you be nothing? The only thing that would be neutral would be something that maybe makes space for other things. But if you have an opinion or no, and this whole like, yeah, and I want to really critique. I don't know how I'm gonna get to it in the story, but critique ideas of neutral, and also ideas that try to say that like there isn't spirit. Ideas that negate are not neutral. You know, so our Western lens that says that, you know, let's say thunderbirds aren't real. It's like, yeah, that's not a neutral opinion, bro. That's a very opinionate. That's a very biased opinion, like, you know. And okay, so while writing this story, I became really worried about narcissism, and the way our social media forces you to constantly be telling stories about yourself, which kind of adds to this narcissistic society that we're in. So I wanted my characters to talk about the non-player characters, the characters that aren't famous, the characters that aren't featured, and I want Granny to be a symbol of that. I want people to take a moment to realize that, like, actually there are no NPCs or we're all NPCs. You know, in somebody else's story, you are not the protagonist. So, yeah, and this relates to life as a video game, nationalism and nostalgia. I think that's the virus. I mean, like, oh, we were great. Ugh. And this is because when the colonizers absorbed the Newtowners and now they become the We Nation, they're going to be hearkening back to season 1 a lot, because nationalism and nostalgia don't create. And when the Wees get colonized and become colonizers, there'll be some kind of a virus that they'll be messing with. Okay, what is a nation? And it's for narrator. It's Granny. Not focusing on the negative. There was something in Leon Simpson's work that says that, like, it's not cool to just always be hating on things all the time. And that's the issue with anti-meta. So that's a and as I critique, I try my best to. I've been trying my best to actually create as well. O is for the new Olympics. Yeah, the first major story in Newtown after Granny gets free is she calls together all her friends in the values and says, all right, let's play some games where nobody loses. What you got? And it's really like going to be seen as like a workshop where different values will pitch different ideas. How about we do this? How about we play this game? You know, so this will be a challenge for me to come up with 10 different games where we all could play where nobody loses, and each game will be representative and suggested by a different value or god or goddess who symbolizes a different feeling. So maybe there'll be like a truth game where we just share truths or things we think are true. I don't know. Or a game to talk about dance moves, dumb dancing. I don't know. That might be the god of silliness. You know, you can see it. We've talked about the pulse before in the book of questions, but have we talked about being possessed by ideas? Ooh, yeah, because really, what's the difference between the truth and an idea, right? So these values, these gods are partly ideas, they're concepts. So some people can become possessed by these values, and I think people in our life are possessed by the things that inspire them. Popular culture as propaganda, and only propaganda. What? Yeah, the protagonist. Now, before we were gonna make this the main, he was gonna be a male and he was gonna be like a annoying businessman. But now we're gonna make this Mr. Prophet is the father of the protagonist. The protagonist is now a beautiful woman who is rebelling against her capitalist father. But how far are you gonna rebel? How far are you gonna break free? She breaks free, but she don't break all the way free. And that's why decolonization is not a metaphor. Political actions as needing to be holistic. I think this is my critique. And this is why I'm like, is that your hill? Because I don't think your hill is holistic enough. You know? People's hills are really, 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 really personal and really, really, really about them. And really, like, when I really had to take into, I'm still taking it in, but decolonization is not a metaphor again, and how it really made me see that my entire worldview and my entire life and my entire plan for myself was rooted in these colonial concepts, which means that it's not just one thing that's gonna work. It's a web. Q is for Queen Delete. You know what happens when the fungible character gets pissed, and it's like, you know what, we're taking all our shit back. So Queen Delete is really, in a way, another version of Granny. She's another character who creates reality for people, but this time the Newtowners are using her. So Granny actually recreated her whole system. The protagonist was using Granny to tell stories and living in those stories, and now Granny is using Flo to make her world work. And this is when she's like, nah. Now we talk about resilience, and I think after resilience comes recognition, and after recognition comes renewal. I think to really be seen helps fill you with life, and then refusal. And this is going to be seen in season 7 when we have to break free of the we colonial people. And I stopped at R. It's different kinds of love, you know, when you're just bored of romance. All right, cool.